When we deal with narcissistic abuse, I want you to understand that the labeled narcissist doesn't matter. This is an unpopular opinion, unpopular belief, because sometimes people want the label for a specific reason. The initial piece a person initially wants the label is so that they can justify themselves to leave. Once you know that he's a narcissist, then you know that there's no chance. You know that he's screwed. You know that there's no opportunity for growth, development, and as a result, you're like, okay, phew, I'm out. There's some people that are holding onto that. They're trying to get the label. And as a result, they stay forever simply because they're looking for the guy to get a diagnosis. He goes, he lies, and he's like, don't have the diagnosis, therefore I can keep abusing you, and it keeps happening. So understand for a moment that if we look at it, the label oftentimes doesn't matter. Now, we also have to look at it from perspective that we have people being like, well, also there's very few diagnostic cases in the world. And when we break it down, it's actually a lot of people still. I'm not going to pull up the actual numbers. If you Google it, you can see the 0.5 or the 1 to 5%. Like there's small percentages. But then you extrapolate that over the US, you extrapolate over the world population. It's not just a few people, it's a lot of people. But people like to take percentages and play around with them so they look better to themselves. Then we also have to acknowledge and admit, hey, narcissists aren't people raising their hands saying, hey, I'm an abuser, can I get diagnosed? So the whole hypothesis of like, oh, well, there's not that many narcissists out there. Yeah, there's not as many diagnoses because who wants to get diagnosed with something that seems incurable or that seems impossible to be able to work through? Now, the fact of the matter, is it impossible? I don't think so. What I think is almost impossible is a person coming to honesty and actually being truthful. And we only see this more and more in our society, becoming more liars and liars and liars across all aspects of society. So we're dealing with this piece here today of truth. Truth is the only thing that can lead to transformation. If you do not have truth in your life, you cannot transform. Think of it for a moment like a map. You have a map in front of you, like an actual physical paper map sitting in front of you, and you have the destination marked, highlighted, and circled. That is where you want to go. But the problem is, if you don't know where on the map you're starting, it doesn't really matter where you want to go. So there's a piece of like, hey, it'd be great to be able to go to this destination. It'd be great to be able to figure out how to get here. But if you don't see on the map that like red dot that says you are here, nothing else matters. You can have the best intentions, the best thought process about where you want to go, who you want to be, how you want to show up in life. But if you don't know where you are, none of it matters. So when we're dealing with toxic relationships and we're dealing with the narcissists in your life and we're dealing with all of these things that are happening, you have to find truth first before anything else can change. Now, truth versus facts. This is the interesting part because truth is very subjective, except for one person, and that's God. I think the majority of truth has to come through God. I think truth has to be from God, and truth is what propels transformation. If you don't have truth, you don't have transformation. If you don't have God helping you find truth, then you have fiction. So when we deal with the narcissist and we deal with your current life circumstances, truth gets a little finicky. Because I have a truth that I believe, you have a truth that you believe, he has a truth that he believes, and all of that is shifted and shaped by our perspectives and our perception of that truth and of that reality. But the thing that doesn't rely on my perspective or my perception is simply facts. Facts are just the cold, hard evidence, the demonstration of something that is going on. There's a fact about who you are. There's a fact about how you live. There's a fact about what's working or not working in your life. There are facts about your job, how much money you make. There are facts about your kids, how many you have. There are facts. The reason why we have to deal with facts versus just saying truth is because the truth piece can be shifted and shaped. The facts can't. Do you see what I mean? Like the facts are just what they are. Like this picture, like this wall, them being a certain color or a certain aspect to them are just factual. It doesn't come down to an opinion. It can come down to actual facts. We can test the wall to see what color it actually is. We can see where does it actually fall on the actual color gradient scale. Like there's so many different aspects to it, but we can just say, okay, if we look at the facts, we can say this is what this is. The problem is when you're in a toxic relationship, you look at the wall and you say it's white. The narcissist looks at the wall and says, actually, it's blue, because he's projecting a different image onto the wall. So this piece of dealing with the facts is very essential. It's not just truth. Now, inside of this, you're looking for him to be truthful. A little bit different, but on the same concept. Looking for him to be truthful. If he's not truthful, nothing else matters. Like, when you understand the crux of everything here, if you're not with a guy who is honest, you don't have a relationship. So stop lying to yourself, stop gaslighting yourself into believing you have something when you actually don't. Because the guy that's in your life hasn't been willing to be honest with you. He hasn't been willing to be transparent with you. Hasn't been willing to be vulnerable with you. So you think you've got a good relationship, but guess what? You don't, because you don't even know who you're with, because the guy that you're with won't be honest. He's got to show up honest. The reason my wife left was because she didn't see transformation. And that transformation wasn't exposed because the truth of God wasn't in me. The transformation wasn't there because I wasn't willing to be honest. I wasn't willing to actually deal with the facts. I was talking a good game, but it wasn't showing up in my transformation. Some behavioral modification, but it wasn't showing up fully. So she left. So this piece of, hey, what about this truth? What about this transformation? That's going to come from you dealing with the facts about your current situation. You actually embracing what are the facts versus falling into the fiction. Falling into the stuff that doesn't help you. Now, the hard part is you want this guy to be truthful with you, right? Like, you want him to be honest. And he gets caught in something. And then it seems like he confesses a little bit, or he tells you a little bit, or out of the blue, he tells you a little bit. And you think this is truth. Now, one of the interesting ways that a narcissist will preface this in his exposure of himself is a small little phrase that'll say, ask me anything. I'll tell you whatever you need to know. And the reason why narcissist puts it this way is he wants to play in control. When he says, ask me anything, I'll tell you anything. I'll be honest. Like, we can work through this. Just ask me. Like, what do you want me to tell you about? Like, what do you think I'm not lying to you about? Now, here's the thing. If you knew all the lies that he was lying about, you probably wouldn't need to ask him about all the lies that he was lying about. But the thing is, a narcissist wants you to ask him so he knows how much you know. That's it. If he can figure out how much you know, then he knows how much he has to confess. If you only know 5 things that he's done out of the 50 things that he's done, he only has to confess to 5. The other 45, don't have to worry about that. At least I don't have to deal with the guilt and shame of dealing with that. I don't have to be accountable. I can move away from that. We can just move on, right? Because that's what narcissist does. Just moves on. Ignores the past, continues to move, and just repeat the past over and over and over. So his goal is just to be able to move on, just to be able to ignore it. And he's going to typically do this to try to convince you to stay, to convince you that it's not that big of a deal, to convince you that he's being truthful, when in reality, he's not. When you have a narcissist that says, ask me anything, you need to understand, you just need him to sit down and do a full disclosure. Be like, all right, sit down. You need to tell me everything. And he's like, I don't know where to start, so why don't you ask me? Be like, nope, you tell me everything. Because otherwise the narcissist does what's called drip truths. And drip truths sometimes can be in this place of awareness. Sometimes can be in this place of manipulation. Sometimes can be in this place of trying to expose different things so they don't feel bad about it internally. But this piece of drip truth is where the truth never fully comes out. It's always partial. It's always like you heard something, so he has to give you a little piece of it to keep you appeased that he's being honest. And then he does a little bit later. Inside of my awareness and my confession, like working on myself, there's a piece of like confessing. Hey, I cheated on you, right? Like there's the affair piece. I just like said this, like, hey, this is what happened. Did I go into all the details? Did I go into all the pieces? No, not at all. But then what would happen is my wife would bring something up later, and then I'd be like, oh, yeah, that happened too. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tell you about that. Oh, hey, remember when we went to this place? And she was like, we never did. And I was like, oh, yeah, that wasn't with you. See, like a lot of pieces that truth started to come out later in pieces. And the reason why it came out in pieces is because I didn't have the emotional capacity to deal with it. So I was like, well, I don't want to hurt her more because I didn't want to deal with my feelings because it's all about me. I don't want to hurt her more because then I don't have to deal with my feelings. So I'll spread it out. I'll tell her like the one thing, deal with her emotions, and then it's better. And then, now I need to tell her about the next thing. Worst way to confess anything ever. So if anyone's watching this and you're like wondering like, how do I confess something? Write it all down and talk and like get it all out of the way. Like once you lay all of your shit on the table, then the other person actually has a good idea of like what they should say with you or not. Versus when you keep dripping it out, all you're doing is producing long-term trauma with this person and keeping them tied to you. That's what was happening with my wife. She's like, there's this trauma on, right? Because it's like, oh, it's better. Oh, just confess something. It's better. He's truthful. Oh, just confess something. It's better. And then even spinning those. Well, you're hurt, but it was also me doing a good thing because I was being honest. You see what I mean? There's so many different pieces of manipulating there that happens inside the relationship too. You want him to be honest. You want him to be truthful. But the problem is narcissists aren't. Okay? Now, is he willing to? Well, time will tell. Is he willing to be honest? You have to be able to see. There's not the best option out there. Like we were talking the other day, like if I could develop like a mobile lie detector that a narcissist should carry around, that way you know if he's lying or not, that'd be great. But unfortunately, we can only see this by proof. And the proof has to come from actions. Has to come from the actual facts of what are you seeing, what are you acknowledging on a day-to-day basis. Is he showing up in a way that's honest, vulnerable, and showing consistent growth and transformation? If he's not, then you need to leave. If I can help you with this, I want you to go to rawmotivations.com. Click on the video. Would love to help you see more of how to heal, grow, and develop you on a day-to-day basis.